Hello, everyone. Welcome again to Esker On Air. We are excited to bring you kind of a special podcast episode in honor of Veterans Day. There are over 21 million veterans in the United States. These are men and women who served in all branches of the United States Armed Forces, including the Marines, Army, Air Force, Navy, and Coast Guard. Today, we have the honor of listening to 4 of our veterans here at Esker talk about their experiences while in active duty and also today post-duty. These veterans are Dan Reeve, our Director of Sales and Business Development, Harry Zimmer, a Sales Development Representative, and 2 of our Business Development Managers, Matt Postlethwait and Mike Necas. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining us today and sharing with us some of your experiences as veterans. To start things off, could you please each introduce yourself to the audience and let them know what branch you served on, how long you served, and where you were based?
I'll start. This is Dan Reeve. Hey, Scott. So I was with the British Army for 10 years as a combat engineer, part of the Royal Engineers, and then I transferred. I found a loophole and managed to transfer to the Wisconsin National Guard, to the Mobile Public Affairs Unit for 18 months. So that was the time in the organizations. I was originally, regiment was based in Nottingham, England. And I did one tour of duty in Iraq in March 2003. And I think I answered all your questions, or did I miss one?
No, I think you got them there.
All right.
Hey, Scott. Harry Zimmer here. Part of the U.S. Army Reserves, specifically at the 102nd MP Company out of Sheboygan, Wisconsin. I've been an MP in the U.S. Army Reserves for almost 5 years. I am now switching roles to the officer side. So I am now a cadet at the ROTC program at UW-Whitewater while going for my master's. And otherwise, one deployment in Afghanistan, Kabul, protecting high-ranking officials, and that's really about it from my end.
Matt, how about yourself?
Hey, Scott. Matt Postlethwait. I served in the United States Navy. I served for 4.5 years. I was based in Norfolk, Virginia. I was my ship was the USS Josephus Daniels as part of the Theodore Roosevelt Battle Group, and I served during the Desert Storm and also the Bosnian conflict. Was part of both of those. I served during both of those conflicts.
Hey, Matt, remind me what you did.
I was an operations specialist, and what the operations specialist did a little bit of everything from navigation all the way up to controlling the aircraft, as far as telling them where to fly, what coordinates, what speeds, and so on and so forth.
Great. And finally, Mike, how about yourself?
Yeah, Mike Necas here. I was in the United States Army from 1997 to just a few months before 9/11. So I always kind of preface that when I talk to folks about it being a pretty fortunate 4-year window, because unlike the other 3, I didn't actually have to go to a combat zone. But I did do basic in Fort Knox, Kentucky, where all the gold is, and then I was off to Fort Carson, Colorado, where I had a great time for about 3 years. And then lastly, I was stationed in my last year, my 4th year, in South Korea, Camp Casey, South Korea. And during that time, I was a cavalry scout.
Okay, great. Well, I know that all veterans have different experiences from their time serving, but is there anything you guys miss from being in the military? I know, Harry, you're still kind of active duty there, or still very much involved. But is there anything you miss, or are there any points, high or low, maybe that you'd like to share?
Well, I think in terms of high points for me, there were many high points. This is Dan, and I got to, through the Army and the Mountaineering Association and their focus on fitness, so I got to climb in the Himalayas twice and all over the world. It was fantastic. I also got my first taste of America. They sent me on an exchange with the US Air Force at Oakville, Wisconsin. So it was just fantastic to get to work with other coalition soldiers and airmen and to do those sort of exchanges. I also really enjoyed it when they would let me vaporize cars and bridges. I found that to be a particularly exciting to spend a little bit of tax dollars, money. I really enjoyed the demolition side of the job. So that
I guess. Oh, go ahead.
I'll let the other guys. Sorry, Harry. Go ahead. We'll come back to low points later.
I'd say for the high point for me, miss being on deployment with the guys. 16 of us all kind of knew each other, our strengths and weaknesses. So, you're away from your family, but then you've got your family there with you. I'd say going, just like with Dan, spending tax dollars, I'd say going to the range almost every few days just to blow off some steam or get some additional training in, and traveling, since being part of a PSD team, we got to travel back and forth between, the Middle East and Europe. So I'd say those are some of the high points that I missed.
Yeah, Scott, this is Matt. One of the biggest thing that I miss is the camaraderie that you have with your, with your friends, with the people that you're serving with, and you're alongside them. You're training daily, and there's a lot of you get to be a tight knit group, and you have to depend on one another. And then also being in the Navy, one of the things I miss is being able to go to some of the great places that I went to. I traveled all over South America. I've been to the Mediterranean twice. I've been to several different islands in the Caribbean. So a lot of great places to visit. So those are always things that I miss about the Navy. I don't miss sleeping in close quarters with 30 other guys. I do not miss that.
I imagine your wife's a bit disappointed because now you've probably got no motivation to go on Mediterranean cruises. You're like, I'm not paying for that. I've been there. Is that the case,
Yeah.
Matt?
Yeah, been there, done that. Yeah. We went on our first cruise last year. Was the first one we've ever went on. It was a Disney cruise.
Mike, how about you?
I think one of the things that I missed the most was some of the camaraderie that Matt just spoke about. Going to the range, I was getting better and better there, as Harry alluded to. But it was a whirlwind. It was it changed your life drastically, right? I'm swept off. I signed the papers. I even do delayed entry because I'm kind of scared, right? So I get 3 months of delayed entry to sit there and say my long goodbye to friends and family, and then it's just this whirlwind into basic training, and not knowing a soul, right? And then having to get broken down and then built back up. And then getting to Colorado, which I was super excited about, right? Colorado was a dream of mine as a 20-year-old, and then to learn that in 2 months we're going to Kuwait for 4 months, and you're constantly having to adjust and react and to not get down on yourself and stuff like that. So I loved the constant change. I love I was in Korea, I was in Kuwait, and I was in Colorado. I call it the 3 Ks. So yeah, it was a 4-year whirlwind, and it was very much enjoyable. And I miss a lot of things about it, but it was exciting, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Mike brings up a point. I think we'd all agree that your battle buddies, your mates. I think the thing that I certainly miss but also benefited from was. So my best man, we've been friends for 20 years, but when we first met he was in my troop or platoon, and we hated one another. I had a few more stripes than he did, and he was a farm boy, but he sure knew how to make anything work pretty much, and his skills really came into fore in Iraq, where we built a pipeline. He was phenomenal. And I think what happened is we came to appreciate each other one night. was like Saturday night, 3 in the morning. We've been on a survival exercise, and he and I are snuggling up to one another inside a lean-to we'd made on this survival exercise. And I think there comes a point when you drop your ego and you suddenly think, well, who is this person next to me? He or she is just trying to get through the day, and you team up and you help one another out. We've been best friends for 20 years, which I think is a great story, because I think it was the military that perhaps not only forced us together, forced us to recognize each other's strengths and weaknesses, like you say, but you do become a bit more tolerant, or you do know that, oh, that's my buddy. I know how he is when he's really tired. He can get a bit cranky, but that's okay. I think you sort of learn that about one another. And I certainly know that, it taught me my weakness. When I get really tired and sleep deprived, and we've all been there, we've hallucinated, or the forest will not stop spinning around you because you're so tired. You cannot keep your eyes open, but you have to. I think you learn a lot about yourself, and you perhaps learn that you have more energy and more drive in there than you might have known otherwise. So there were some of the things I took away from it.
Yeah, I mean, going off, with dances, with knowing, your buddies, their little idiosyncrasies, they know, where you're at where you need to be as a standard in the Army, and you're there to kind of help push each other. And it doesn't matter, at the end of the day, you guys are all in the same boat. Just trying to get through the day. And I would say for the lowest point, I have to go all the way back to basic training. I never really camped when I was younger. I never was really an outdoor kind of person, and we had to do night guard, fire guard out in the field, and it was downpouring, and I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, like, what did I sign myself up for? Why, I'm out here pretending that there's bad guys, but there's no one out here. It's just drill sergeants walking around, smoking us and yelling at us for falling asleep. And I could be on my couch, playing video games or hanging out with my buddies at a bar, and no, I'm here. I'm stuck with this fake, well, not fake, it was a real 249, blank bullets, but then I look over at my buddy Lemaire, and I'm like, he's like, man, this sucks. And I was like, yeah. And, then we just started telling each other stories. And I think that's, that's where it came into, is that, it's a nice, kind of nice set of skills that you start building is telling each other stories. And you can't just sit there in silence. You really got to, push each other and kind of help each other out to stay focused, because last thing you want to do is fail and fall asleep on your own self, and you don't want to do that.
So sorry, I noticed kind of the perfect way to segue into the next question. Dan, you were mentioning your best man, and you identified the skills that he brought to the table. Harry, you were talking about how the guy you were next to, you had different ways of kind of connecting with each other. But what kind of skills, what kind of traits have you been able to take away from your experiences in the military and apply them to your current roles? Even going beyond that, if there's anybody listening here that might be thinking about hiring somebody who has experience in the United States military, what would you say to them?
I think for me, and I'm sure the lads here will have their own opinions. For me, it taught me that I had more energy and drive. And I think it brought out the competitiveness in me, which is important in sales. You've got to be driven. You've got to meet the standard, as Harry talked about, and you want to exceed the standard. It really sort of drove, and they had this expectation of excellence. And so I think I've always, since then, held myself that, not that I'm in the military anymore, but I want to still sort of honor and stick to some of the drive, the competitiveness, the professionalism, the excellence that they expected. I think that rubs off. It rubbed off on me. I think it rubs off on many. So if you are interviewing a potential candidate, maybe you sort of look for examples of that. You might find some of that. That's my take.
Yeah, just to go off on that, at least for me, I'd say, like I highlighted, storytelling, a lot of active listening, and attention to detail. They're always talking about being attentive to detail. Could save your life, could save your buddies, but also at the same time, it taught me to be, have a competitive drive, and exceed the standard. And I kind of try to apply that, to every job that I've been in, and especially over at Esker. I'd like to exceed that goal. I hate not meeting the standard, and I'm one of those guys that kind of takes it to heart. And, if I'm not seeing the goals that I set myself, just like in the Army, if I'm not hitting the PT score that I want, I kind of get down. But then again, I think to myself, who do I look to? And I kind of treat my coworkers like my battle buddies. I'm asking, what can I do to, get to where you're at? How can I exceed? And now that I'm switching over to the officer side, now I'm being held to an even higher standard. So I guess you'd say a lot of pressure, especially working in sales. But at the same time, I always think to myself, like, there's a lot of other things to, not worry about while you're in the Army. And so, that's kind of where I'm at over at Esker.
Yeah, and this is Matt. Hi. To follow up on what Harry and Dan were saying, one of the things that I took away, I was thinking about this question when I was reading it again earlier today, and one of the things that I've taken away and applied it towards sales are several things, but the thing that stood out to me are two words: discipline and routine. Just having the discipline to have that routine and do the same, do repetitive tasks over again that work, that you're trained and it's ingrained into you when you're in the military, is just, that repetition that practice makes perfect, if you will. And just repeating that process over and over again, because in sales we repeat a process, we go through it, and there's a process to it. Now, not everyone is exactly the same. Obviously, much like not every drill or every thing that you are faced with in the military is the same. So that's transferable as far as that goes. And another thing for me personally was just doing a lot of physical stuff that took me outside of my comfort zone. Some of the training that I had really took me, out of my comfort zone, which is a good thing. I think, a lot of times it's good for individuals to come out of their comfort zone. And then, lastly, for me in sales, is being able to think on the fly and make decisions very quickly. When you're in front of a customer, if you're in front of you're in a boardroom, or you're in, in today's world, if you're on a Teams call with the CFO or VP of finance or whatever, with a customer, and sometimes you need to be able to be flexible and make decisions and think on the fly, and that is something that I felt like was transferable from my time in the military.
Last but not least, there's a saying that I've always taken away from my days in the military, and that was embrace the suck. And it was born again too with the Chicago Cubs a couple of years ago. They had all these T-shirts called "Embrace the Suck." I mean, there were so many times where, like, as a Cab Scout, you are out on an observation point, an OP, right? And you're supposed to sit there even during training exercises for days at a time and just report back enemy movement. And there were days where it was so hot in Kuwait, for instance, or so muggy, and the mosquitoes were so bad in Korea that I put my gas mask on in like 95-degree heat just to keep them off me. And you're out there for hours. There's nowhere to go. There's no reprieve, right? So you have to embrace that. And that's something that I've taken with me ever since my days, which is 20 years ago now, since I got out of the military, is that as bad as, you know, updating Salesforce or cold calling or doing any of the things that Esker demands or that being a salesperson demands, none of it compares to kind of how bad it was way back in the day. And so I don't get overwhelmed as a result. And I do look at other folks in my life, and I do think that a lot of folks probably could have benefited from some military training, some drill sergeants yelling at them for a couple weeks, you know, might have made them into I don't know, stronger, maybe more well-adapted individuals later on in life.
You know, I think you bring up a good point, Mike. Sometimes I look back. I remember a day in Iraq where we threw out some bottles of water, and the local kids were driving. I think it's southern Iraq near Basra, and we were driving along, and the kids came running out to pick up these bottles of water as if they'd just won the lottery. And I was looking at the homes where they lived, and I was looking at the lack of infrastructure, and you could tell they were so excited to get this bottle of water to take home to their parents. And it just hit me. You're here moaning about the fact that you're wearing body armor and you're hot, and your meal's right in the. If you want a meal, I've got a meal. I've got a fresh meal tonight. I've got water. Okay, it's hot, but I've been used to that now for 6 months. But just to see that, and sometimes I do. When life is hard, I'll remind myself I'll take a hard day here over any average day in Iraq, because just being willing to play on your positives and remember what you have versus it really dawns on me. And now I have 2 girls myself, and I'm so grateful for that. I don't think, unless things go really bad, they will probably ever be in such a bad situation as those little girls that I saw in Basra. I mean, it touched me. It kind of, I felt pretty. It definitely made me grateful. I think that when you've had tough times, or been taken out of your comfort zone, as you talked about, Matt, or seen something that was quite shocking, you're like, things aren't that bad. Things are manageable here.
Agreed.
For sure. And Dan, that's a great point. I spent some time in South America. Nothing like Iraq, but in South America, there's a lot of poverty, and in particular, countries like Peru and Ecuador. And just to see the poverty level that those people work in, we did some community outreach when we were training with those navies, and did some things within the community, and just to see how much they appreciated that, and just to see the level of poverty was mind-boggling for me. And like you said, makes you appreciate where you are, where we are with us and our families.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that one, especially when you're used to 200 megabytes per second of internet and upload speed, and then you get over to a base in Afghanistan and you've got 2.1, and so you're kind of like, man, this is going to take hours to load a video that I just want to watch, or and then you see kids on the streets and in Kabul, and then you see all the corrupted police, and and there's I know we have our struggles here in the U.S., but it doesn't compare to a day for a child in Afghanistan at all. We're driving by and they're motioning me like I'm hungry, like give me some food, and unfortunately you can't get out and give them food, because that's just another opportunity for the enemy to take a shot at us. So as much as we'd like to stop on the road and give them water and some food, you gotta keep driving, and then you kind of gotta reel yourself back in and be like, I'm here to do this. As much as I want to be philanthropist over here, I got that's not what the Army has taught me. So taught me more to be self-disciplined and be grateful for what you have. So
healthy dose of perspective all around, it sounds like. So before we wrap up here today, is there anything else that any of you would like to add? Anything else that you think people should know about, life as a veteran?
I think coming home it can be tricky. I think sometimes as a veteran, what we didn't realize is when you go overseas, or if you're in Matt's case, if you're on a ship and you're deployed or whatever, the world continues to move back home. You come back in the streets, suddenly there's 5 more houses, or the politics have changed, or the landscape has changed, and relationships. I mean, I had 2 broken relationships with the military deployments, and things change. And I think that's probably one of the harder things on the veteran. I do think possibly that as a result of that, a lot of veterans have learned to navigate and deal with that. But that was, I think when we talked about doing this podcast, what was some of the downsides? Perhaps that's some of the downside is when you're away, you think the world is, you can come back to the world and everything will be just as it was. And that's not necessarily the case. I think for anybody listening to the podcast, I would say, I think obviously you're going to interview veterans and understand if they're a good fit for your organization. But I would encourage folks to look under the hood, because there's a lot of training. The folks that have been in the military are probably much more willing to go through things like role play or practice and rehearsals. Others might say, oh, why are we doing that yet again? And Mike and Matt talked about that. But I think any of your veterans are more likely to say, well, we get it. We were in the military. We knew how to clean the weapon. We knew how we do safety procedures. We could do them with our eyes closed, literally. But we never sort of, your veteran never said, well, why are we doing this? They understood there was a reason for keeping the weapon clean. There was a reason for doing safety drills. So I do think it's worth giving veterans a chance, and, obviously see if they fit your organization or not.
Yeah, that's great. I think we can leave it there. So, gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us here today. We're all very lucky to live in the country that we do, and of course that's in no small part to the men and women of our armed forces. So anyone listening out there, thank you as well if you have served. And finally, thank you for our listeners for joining us here again. Stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you next time.